Everything sucks. Everything sucks. The world is falling apart, but at least we have death metal. Ooh, whoa, whoa. Ooh, whoa, whoa. Oh, yeah. Take it away, Chris Barnes. Everything sucks, but at least we have death metal. Ooh. Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today I'm doing something a little different. TyTilly from Heaviest of Art is back, a true connoisseur of extreme music, and he's back because we're talking about one of the most important and, in my opinion, best death metal albums of all time, Slaughter the Soul from At the Gates, which turns 25 next week, November 14th, I believe.
Yeah, I think it is the 14th. That's the date, I believe.
I do. It's funny, I got two different release dates here. I got one that says October 3rd and the other that says November 14th, but the 14th sounds more accurate.
Yeah, it can be either or because different release times possibly for different physical mediums and all that.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe maybe it was released in Sweden in October but didn't get to North America till November.
Yeah, that probably could be the case. I can look real quick and we can double check, but the point of the matter is that it's celebrating its silver anniversary. That's
Yes.
the most important thing.
I mean, this was the band's fourth studio album. I've said it many times on the Metal Meltdown. This is one of my all-time favorite death metal records. One of my favorite records in general. This thing lights a fucking fire under my ass like you wouldn't believe when I start to listen to this thing.
Oh yeah, it's one of those. It's just one of those albums that, like, from the moment you put on Blinded by Fear, it's kind of funny. It has that moment when it starts where you think, oh shit, did I just blow my speakers? And then that bam bam bam, like that kind of like you're throwing a tennis ball through pieces of like sheet metal and stuff, and then you're just like, oh wait, what's this? And then you get that audio sample, and then that HM2, that signature Swedish HM2 sound just comes in and just boom.
Oh, it's insane, man. It's because I mean, I remember the first time I heard this, the industrial drums and the keyboards and the samples. Literally, as a kid, I was like, "Oh, so I guess this is gonna be like some Marilyn Manson shit or whatever." I don't know. Like that's the first thing that came to my mind. And then that riff comes in, and I'm like, "Oh, no, that's not even close." Manson wishes he could do this.
Oh yeah, it's like and that's the thing is it's like you look at that cover too because and we'll talk about this as we get in, but it's like you look at that cover and you see kind of how slick the cover looks, like with the art, with the logo and everything, and you think, okay, what, I wonder what this could be all about, especially with this imagery, and you have no idea what you're getting yourself into if it's your first time hearing this album.
Because, I mean, on surface level, production-wise, artwork-wise, all that shit, it doesn't really look like a traditional death metal album. There are no body parts. There are no knives, weapons, tombstones anywhere to be found on the cover. The sound is very clean, very crisp. Definitely compressed, but still pretty transparent. Like, you can hear everything pretty well. It's a far cry from the days of fucking gutturals in your fucking face and tremolo riffs and caveman drumming.
Oh yeah, that's the thing is, and again, like the whole aesthetic of it is just very. It's a pummeling record, like you said, and the thing is that really defines it is how it kind of flies in the face of that of what was conceived and like seen as what death metal was. and it's kind of interesting too, because like there's some of their Swedish counterparts, like, and we can talk a little bit more about this, but like you look at the artwork of Slaughter of the Soul, and then you look at another album that was released in '95 by a Swedish band, Opeth. You look at the cover of Orchid, and you're like, is this a death metal album?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hold on. And it kind of it just throws you off just a tad, but then when you throw it on, it's like, oh boy, okay, here we go. Let's see what we've got in store.
Mm-hmm. I think the big thing though is that Opeth at the core still very much prog metal. I mean, we can call them progressive death, progressive black, blackened death, whatever. But at the core, they're always prog metal. Whereas At the Gates is like distinctly going for like a new type of death metal altogether.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what's crazy is like you look at what was going on in from like the period of like the late '80s to the mid '90s, because I feel like, to me personally, um, the golden age of old school death metal goes from about like roughly '88 to '96, and I feel like the two albums that bookend that are Leprosy and None So Vile by Cryptopsy. Those are the two bookends, and everything in between is like, it's just great. You have all these albums that come through, but when it came to Sweden, it was very interesting that the distinction between the two scenes that were going on in the two major cities. You had what was going on in Stockholm, and then you had what was going on in Gothenburg, and each thing was very like and you can tell like with death metal wherever it comes from, it's all very different regionally. Like
Mm-hmm.
death metal from California, even nowadays, and especially back then, was different from what was going on in Florida or New York or in Helsinki, Finland. But in just the two cities in Stockholm, it's vastly different from one another.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you go back to bands like some other Swedish death metal bands like Entombed and Dismember and Unleashed, and at the time they're playing a very kind of stark, very brutal death metal, kind of on par with what we're seeing from America at that time, but still kind of still its own thing. And then there's At the Gates. People seem to think that At the Gates is later. They're not. Their first EP comes out in 1991, same year Entombed puts out their debut album. So they're growing up at the same time as Entombed and Dismember, but they're going down more melodic territory, whereas Entombed is getting more brutal. At the Gates is focusing on their songwriting.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very interesting. Like you have all these bands that like, a lot of people think when they hear when you talk, like I've talked with people who think, well, Stockholm is where you have the the sewer kind of just like the grimy stuff, and then you have Gothenburg, which has like the more, like you said, it's more focused on the songwriting. It's a lot more progressively structured, but it's very interesting because it's like in Stockholm you had other, like some of the bands that also came out of Stockholm were like a band like Unanimated, who were essentially playing a very early form of melodic death metal, and they were playing shows with like Dissection, and like they were supposed to tour with Catatonia right after Catatonia had put out their demo.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to Gothenburg, like there's just something about what's going on there where they all are like, okay, Stockholm's got their thing. Why don't we focus on what we want to do? Because it seems like when you look at Stockholm, there's a little bit of like a gnarly hardcore punk kind of attitude to their death metal, whereas with the Gothenburg scene, you're seeing guys who are more focused on, okay, how can we make our death metal sound a little bit more like if it's being played by Adrian Smith and Dave Murray?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's where At the Gates comes through as the pioneers, I believe, because they've been kicking around for the longest of the melodic death metal pioneers, and because Slaughter of the Soul is just so big. Like, I think people, when we talk about melodic death metal, there's lots of bands to talk about. But as far as I'm concerned, At the Gates, they're the big boys. You know, they're kicking around all through the early 90s. By comparison, Dark Tranquillity doesn't put out their debut until 93. In Flames doesn't put out their debut album until 94. Arch Enemy doesn't put out their debut album until 95. And let's be honest, nobody gives a shit about Arch Enemy until Wage of Sins in 2001. So...
Exactly, yeah.
And even one of the biggest bands in all of melodic death metal, Amon Amarth, they don't show up till 98. At the Gates is dominating the scene for a few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's crazy to think that it's like the whole legacy that At the Gates has been able to garner with this album. I mean, like we've talked about, this is their fourth album. Mm-hmm. They're deep into what they're doing, but simply because of what was going on with them, this was the album that they put every ounce of their creativity and their soul into. I mean, kind of meta.
No pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended. But like, it's interesting to think and know that like this would be their this would be their last album until 2014. So that's like a span of like what, almost 18, 19 years?
Yeah, 19 years. So 20 years, 2 decades without At the Gates, and the entire genre has changed forever by this one album.
Like it's kind of like how, like, the way I see it is like the way that Disembowelment's transcendence into the peripheral is to Death Doom. At the Gates, like Slaughter of the Soul, is to what is that for. It's the benchmark for anybody who wants to start a death metal band who has an inkling of more melodic flourishes, a little bit. You know, I mean, it's not a bad thing when I say this, like cleaner production. You want it to be a little bit more sophisticated in a way.
Absolutely. I think, and this is an issue that some like retro old school death metal has now. I think people get too obsessed with that really grimy, super primitive sound. Don't get me wrong, some bands do it really fucking well. I think Tomb Mold, Outer Heaven are great examples of that. But it can't just be gutturals and static and noise forever. At some point, there needs to be, like, I want to see some, like, actual production value and artistry.
Exactly.
And that's where Slaughter of the Soul comes in perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it balances those little things. Like, I mean, geez, there's the... Hold on. There's that one track that kind of bridges the gap. If you have like the LP, it's the side A closer. It's Into the Dead Sky. That kind of just like it. The first half of the record kind of takes you through just pummeling, and then it allows you to just kind of ride that wave out into the end of the end of side A, and then side B begins, and you just hear that, and it's like,
oh yeah,
oh, here we go again.
And that shook brings up an interesting point. I can't think of a lot of death metal around this time that's using samples the way At the Gates is. Like vocal samples, there's the shotgun sample. There's also a lot of synthesizers and industrial soundscapes. This is not stuff you see in any death metal at this time.
Oh yeah, like as much as people want to say, well, there's a lot of experimentation going on with Cynic, and all that. It's like, okay, well, Cynic is trying to fuse death metal with fusion, dog. It's like what At the Gates are trying to do is like make, in their own little way, the Gothenburg like a Gothenburg death metal version of a Captain Beefheart album.
Oh, that's an interesting. You know what? You're onto something there. That's actually a good one.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I've always thought about it, because it's like you listen to, and that's kind of how At the Gates has always been, in my opinion. Like you listen to the Red in the Sky Is Ours. That album is just, I'm gonna say it, that album is just no bars, no holds barred. It's fucking weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fucking weird album, but man, does it work.
Yeah, it doesn't sound or feel like any other death metal coming out in Sweden at that time, or any other death metal period at that time. It's very weird.
When that album came out in 92, I mean, geez, you had, like, what, in 92 coming out? Like, The Fourth Crusade by Bolt Thrower. You had, can't think of a whole bunch off the top of my head, but, like,
I can look it up if it helps.
Stones.
I'll look it up if it helps, just for the sake of, like, what the hell was going on in that year, you know?
Yeah, and, like, I think that was, the way I see Red in the Sky Is Ours is, like, that was kind of, like, their answer to Death's Human. Because, let's be honest, Human was, like, a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
Only being released a year previous to that. And so I feel like them getting further and further into their sound, that's what they kind of set on the Red in the Sky Is Ours would culminate fully on Slaughter of the Soul.
So I actually just looked this up. The first result was 1992 in heavy music on Wikipedia. So This may not be the most informed source, because who knows, but you got Tomb of the Mutilated came out this year from Cannibal Corpse. The End Complete from Obituary came out this year. You had records from Gorefest, Ex-Hoarder, Unleashed, a lot of bands that they're not old per se, but these are bands that are settling into a style, a routine, an identity, and At the Gates just emerges with, like, hey, here's our weird ass buffoonery.
Yeah. You also have, like, there's albums from, Paradise Lost that have come out, Solitude Eternus, Amorphous came out with their first album. And then another game changer that came out in 92, Vulgar Display of Power. That came out that year.
I'm gonna need you to speak up, good sir. We can't hear you no more.
Oh, I was just saying that a Vulgar Display of Power. There's some good 1992.
We're having some issues with the audio. Are you walking around?
Yeah, no. Sorry, I was for some reason the speaker was going weird. But I was just saying that in 1992, Vulgar Display of Power also came out. So that's another, like, really weird, like, there's a lot of competition in 92.
Mm-hmm.
But At the Gates had somewhat of an answer to that with the way they had the Red in the Sky Is Ours.
Mm-hmm. And they get weirder and they get stronger as songwriters as time goes on, to the point where when we get to Slaughter the Soul, it's just bangers, man, from start to finish.
Yeah, like, Anders, you can definitely tell Anders Bueller and oh my gosh, I forgot the other guy's name. It's Alf Svensson. They just start going with, and they start getting better in terms of how they write their riffs. It's becoming more fluid. It's not as influenced by thrash metal, like, because when you listen to Gardens of Grief, there's some thrash influence, just a tad, but they're starting to fully come into their own after they come out with Terminal Spirit Disease, and then they come out with Slaughter the Soul, and they are completely dialed the fuck in.
Mm-hmm. And, like, it's very much their own thing. Like, I would argue some of the thrashy influences are still remaining, but not to the point where I'm like, oh, well, obviously At the Gates listens to a lot of, I don't know, fucking know, Metallica or whatever. Like,
yeah.
Slaughter the Soul very much just speaks for itself in that sense. The title track alone, that is hands down one of the greatest fucking songs that any metal band has ever written, and I will fight anyone that argues otherwise.
Oh, yeah. And you listen to Thomas or Tompa's, you listen to his vocals, and it's just utterly savage.
Mm-hmm.
Especially on that title track. It's just like, yo, is this guy gonna, like, blow out his voice? Like, holy shit.
Mm-hmm. And the killer is, I'm not gonna sit here and act like I'm an old man, because I'm not. But when I was a teenager, I got into trouble. I got into fights. I did stupid shit. I fucked up every bone in my body. I can't mosh anymore. But last year, when I saw At the Gates at the Rebel fucking club, and they played Slaughter the Soul, I fucking lost it.
Oh,
I lost my... I moshed. I jumped. I kicked some people in the fucking head. Like, it was like I was a kid again. I was just like, oh my god. Like, that song is just so utterly savage.
Yeah, it's just... There's just something about hearing those songs when you're... Because, like, I came into death metal pretty late. Like, I came into it around 2017-ish, or a little bit further through listening to stuff. Like, I mean, obviously, like, growing up listening to stuff with my dad, like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and then, like, Slayer eventually. But then getting into stuff like Gojira and then Horrendous, I kind of had to, go and backtrack. And hearing At the Gates was just like, it's like, it makes you just instantly want to, like, fucking throw somebody. It's like, that's just the involuntary, like, reptile brain response. It's just like, okay, what's the nearest thing that's not bolted down that I can just toss?
Literally. I was listening to the album last night. I thought I was going to flip my table.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
I just want to punch someone when Suicide Nation or World of Lies comes on.
Oh, Under Serpent Sun as well. I feel like enough people don't talk about that track. It has some crippling grooves in it.
Oh, dude. And then one of the best parts of the whole album is, like, hearing Cold and having Andy LaRocque from fucking King Diamond play that solo.
Yes. Oh, he just rips it too. It's unreal.
Oh, and I mean, it's crazy that, like, even Andrew, from, like, some stuff that I've read, Anders Bueller even says that, like, he can't even play that solo the way Andy LaRocque plays it.
How I kind of believe that, with all due respect.
Like, it's, and because, like, Andy LaRocque was the mastermind behind the King Diamond riffs. He was the freaking dude who was playing guitar on individual thought patterns.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
a severely underrated guitar player. The dude's a mastermind. And he's still playing with King Diamond nowadays, isn't he?
I think so. I would imagine so.
Because he hasn't done, I mean, aside from some guest spots, he hasn't done a whole lot outside of King Diamond. Like, I'm looking here at his discography on Wikipedia, at least, and, like, the Death album shows up. Something called Ill Will, which I'm not familiar with. Yeah, it's mostly a lot of guest spots and stuff. Like, oh, he was on, like, a fucking Falconer album for 5 seconds or some shit like that.
Yeah, he was, at one point, like, he took a break from King Diamond and was supposed to join Candlemass.
Ooh. Wow.
Yeah, he was supposed to join Candlemass right after they got Messiah Markovan, and, like, he recorded, like, most of the demo material for Nightfall, and in fact, the album's closing track, Black Candles, is actually Andy LaRocque playing.
I didn't even know that. Huh.
Yeah, and so it's kind of it all kind of, like, melts together, because, like, you hear, again, Nightfall and Candlemass, a Swedish band. Nightfall is where they kind of stepped up their melodicism. It's like they're kind of like, At the Gates is kind of taking what they know in the death metal scene and also kind of pulling certain influences and saying, okay, we can pick from here, we can pick from there, we can make what we want to do, and, everybody can fuck off if they don't like it. Because, I mean, I honestly can't imagine a world where Slaughter of the Soul is seen as, like, a disappointment. You know what I mean?
No, not at all. It's just remarkable. It's too good to not like.
Yeah, it really is. And the way that it's been able to influence, even bands who are, like, their contemporaries, it's very interesting to see.
Oh yeah. Like, and I think part of the reason why this had as much of an impact as it did as well is the fact that At the Gates just kind of fucked off when this album came out.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole world went, what happened here? And people looked at it so closely. And that the producer on this record, Friedrich Nordstrom, he became the with At the Gates Gone, he said, well, screw it, I'm taking this sound and I'm bringing it to literally every other band, which is exactly what he did. He ended up making records with Dark Tranquillity, with In Flames, with Soilwork, with Opeth, with Arch Enemy. He continues to produce, he plays in Dream Evil today. And if you listen to those records, it has that sound that At the Gates pioneered on Slaughter of the Soul.
Yeah, and then it's also funny to note that, like, after all that time, he finally came back and returned and helped them make their long-awaited and arguably incredibly underrated comeback with At War with Reality.
Oh my God, what a great record! One of the greatest comeback records ever.
Yeah, like
my God,
on the same level as like Surgical Steel. Like, that's how incredible that is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember when that album came out, At War with Reality, because that was pretty much my official introduction to At the Gates. And I remember seeing them on the Decibel Magazine tour with like Converge and Pallbearer, and it was such a weird and wild night.
Oh, and I bet they did. And did they play in like a tiny venue?
Decently sized by the standards of like where I would expect a metal band to play, but it's not big. It's not like a big. It's not an arena. It's not a nightclub. You know.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of the in between.
Yeah. I think the biggest venue At the Gates have played here in Toronto, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but 2 years ago they were here with Behemoth, opening for Behemoth, and they were at the Danforth Music Hall, which is a pretty decently sized venue. Like, Justin Bieber does his Christmas shows there.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, like, and Melissa Etheridge has played there. The fucking Game Grumps have done their comedy shows there. Like, it's a decently sized venue. You can get a lot of people in there if you play your cards right.
That's pretty sick. And the fact that, like, again, like you said, like, after Slaughter of the Soul came out, they were kind of just like, all right, peace out. And they still are able to draw people from all over, from fans who were there when they put out Terminal Spirit Disease and when Slaughter of the Soul initially came out, and then kids who have grown up listening to stuff like that, or who have discovered stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they all come in, and that's something that, like, I haven't seen At the Gates live yet, and I say that yet, considering what's going on, but then also because just I was supposed to see them in August at Psycho performing Slaughter of the Soul in its entirety.
Oh, that's sad.
Oh, dude.
Oh.
Talk about heartbreaking.
Oh, man. Yeah. I'm sorry.
As excited as I was to see, like, Merciful Fate, Danzig, Emperor, like, being able to go and see a seminal album like Slaughter of the Soul performed in its entirety is like, that's a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, I'd rather see that than Danzig, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I would.
I mean, hell, Danzig was supposed to play Lucifuge in its entirety, so it's like, ooh.
I mean, in theory that's cool, but Danzig's voice has gone to hell lately, so
yeah.
I don't know. That's the kind of show where I'd pop in for like 10 minutes and be like, cool, I can say that I saw Danzig, and I'd probably leave, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and it's crazy because, like, even after all these years, I think for some people, when At War with Reality was announced, people were like, okay, is Thomas going to be able to still bring
the thunder, I suppose.
Yeah,
the terror.
Yeah, is he going to still be able to bring the like everything that he's got? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And he fucking proved everyone wrong.
Mm-hmm. No, that was probably that was maybe the best album released that year for death metal.
Oh, easy.
If not the best, then definitely in the top, like 3, 5, whatever.
Oh yeah, like when you look at the in 2014, I have the year end list for Decibel. I have the issue, not on me, but I have the issue. Like that top 5 I can't remember the 4 and 5, but 3 was Horrendous as Ectasis, and then 2 was At War with Reality, and 1 was, I was blown away that year because I was like, whoa, that happened. But it was the album of the year that year was Foundations of Burden.
Ooh, wow, pallbearer beating At the Gates. Damn, I don't blame him though. That's a solid record. It's pretty tight competition right there.
Yeah, 2014 was a damn good year, but like, oh man, it's insane. Mm-hmm. It's insane. But like, when you hear that, when you hear again, like, you hear and see, oh, At the Gates, what's this about? Like, a whole bunch of kids probably saw that issue, didn't know who At the Gates were, and like knew that this was big for a lot of people. So they go back and they find this crazy album cover with Jesus on it, and taken apart gun.
This is gonna be a good Christian metal album.
Yeah, it's like, I wonder if this is gonna have a rendition of "Nearer My God to Thee" on it.
God, they would turn that into a satanic anthem if they had the opportunity. God damn.
Oh, dude.
I kind of unironically want that to happen now.
Oh, dude, let's petition them and just be like, hey, guys, make this work.
Yeah, we got an idea.
Can you put this into play?
And you know, it's funny that you talk about like how kids respond to At the Gates, because something people talk about it, but no one really talks about it. Slaughter of the Soul had a profound impact on the evolution of the American metalcore sound.
Oh my gosh.
Like we talk about how like some bands have riffs that are similar, but we really need to like really talk about the fact that for many years, the likes of Shadows Fall, All That Remains, As I Lay Dying, Killswitch Engage worshipped Slaughter of the Soul. Worshipped.
Oh yeah, like the thing is like now it's kind of become a meme as to how much like albums like Slaughter of the Soul and Jester Race and The Gallery have been to contemporary American heavy metal. Like, and you know, the thing is the one thing that I've noticed though is I think the one thing that they tried to say, okay, we're not too influenced by them, because you listen to a lot of the Killswitch Engages, the Shadows Falls, they don't have that HM2 sound. I think if they had the HM2 pedal, then everybody would be like, wait, wait, we know who you're influenced by.
Mm-hmm. And I guess also, to be fair, in the case of some of these bands, they're also like, oh, we also love In Flames and all these other bands. And I suppose with that in mind, it is an interesting coincidence that In Flames, right around the early 2000s, starts to pivot to a sound more influenced by melodic American metal and metalcore. But that's a whole other video I can do.
Yeah, and not in a bad way too. Well, in somewhat of a controversial decision, kind of like in a less controversial way of how Judas Priest started paying more attention to what was going on in the Nawabum scene. I mean, there is a tectonic difference between an album like Sad Wings of Destiny and British Steel. Like,
absolutely. Like Sad Wings is like, we're gonna make some epic hard rock with some like kind of progressive flares and a really heavy guitar sound. And then you get to British Steel and we're just like, yeah, we listened to a lot of like Iron Maiden and like early Def Leppard and we're ready to fucking party.
Yeah. And so like when you apply that to what was going on in the early 2000s, I mean, you had bands that were kind of doing what they were trying to do. You know, you had Mastodon trying to fuse Neurosis, Maiden, and like Black Sabbath all together. And then you had Lamb of God essentially trying to resurrect what Pantera were doing, because Pantera were kind of like, if they were not broken up already, they were on an indefinite hiatus. And then you have all these young kids who were into like hardcore and shit like that here in the States and elsewhere, who saw what was, you know, they were like, okay, well that's all well and good, but they started digging through used CD racks at record stores, and they find albums like Lunar Strain, Jester Race, The Gallery, and eventually Slaughter of the Soul.
It is funny you mention Lamb of God specifically, because this is a band, I've said it somewhere on the Metal Meltdown. If I haven't, I'm saying it now. I have always described this band as like a really fucking wild, spicy combination of Exodus, Pantera, and At the Gates.
And you know what? I can see that.
Like it's got the thrash, it's got the grooves, it's got the death metal, it's got the hardcore influences all fused together. It's probably safe to call them metalcore just because it leans closest to that, but at the same time, like, I can't ignore the thrash influences, I can't ignore the death influences. They've got like some straight up sludge and doom metal influences that no one wants to talk about as well.
Oh shit! Like I see so many fucking promo photos of like old school promo photos of Randy wearing Kylesa, Baroness, and Black Tusk t-shirts. It's like, bro, I know for a fact you want to bring some like Savannah sludge into the sound, and they kind of did, but not to the extent that they became like a sludge band.
Oh yeah, there were some tracks on Resolution, especially where like the opening track, even Straight for the Sun, that was like some devastating, earth-scorching sludge right there. And side note, it's worth noting that Randy did briefly play with I Hate God a couple of years back when Mike Williams was getting really sick.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah.
So,
and with the whole with Lamb of God being influenced by At the Gates, it's like you can automatically hear it because they're taking from that chugging, brutal dual guitar sound, and that's another thing that's very, kind of symbiotic with Gothenburg death metal, is they can write these just, earth destroying riffs, but then they are able to just have these soaring leads. Like even with a band that kind of like fused black metal into it, like Dissection, you have those moments where it's just like you just want to like hit something, but then there are also just these parts where it's just very beautiful. It's very, I mean, it's melodic. It's very touching. It's kind of like it like lights a little bit of a fire within you. Like, oh wow, this is like next level musicianship.
And I think that's probably maybe the best thing about melodic death metal too, is that this is the point where death metal transcends being just a bunch of mindless bashing. No disrespect to Cannibal Corpse or anyone else, but let's be honest here. And it becomes music. There's real artistry here. Like real songwriting, real production value, real musicianship. And even when we look at bands, of Cynic and Atheist as well, they had a lot of melodic flourishes as well. It's not just that they were technical. Like, to simply say that, not to say they aren't tech deaf, because they very much were, but they weren't tech for the sake of being tech, which is what tech deaf has become now.
Yeah, and I would even go so far as to say, like, listening to some of these early At the Gates records, like Red in the Sky's Ours and With Fear I Kiss the Burning Sky, Terminal Spirit Disease, not as much, but then especially Slaughter of the Soul, I would even, to a certain extent, call them like experimental records. They're very in their own league, kind of like in the way that like when Paradise Lost came out with Gothic in 1991, like nobody knew what the hell to make of it, and I'm pretty sure that's what a lot of people felt in 4 years later when Slaughter of the Soul came out. They were like, okay, well, this is death metal, but this is different.
It was so ahead of its time.
Yeah, and I mean, even now, you listen to it, again, 25 years later, like, this album's only a month younger than I am, or a couple months younger than I am.
And it's aged remarkably.
Remarkably
well, I should say.
You could throw it on for some unsuspecting dude now, for some unsuspecting person now, and it's like, okay, when do you think this came out? Oh, I bet it probably came out like 5 or 6 years ago. Try 25, motherfucker.
Yeah, honestly. And the crazy thing is, a lot of the bands that this influenced, you can't say that about those bands. You can't. You can't
No.
even say that about bands that blatantly, unapologetically, inarguably copy the exact formula of this. Like, I love you, Cataclysm, but let's be honest, you are Diet at the Gates.
Yeah, and that's again, and you can agree with me on. I'm willing to bet you'd agree with me on this. That's another part of where the meme comes in. It's like all these bands that are taking from the like some of the bands that take from the influence of At the Gates, they see how great it is, and they're able to capitalize in their own way. But then sometimes there are some artists who rip it off too much, but they can't really like go to those heights.
Mm-hmm. And that's the same problem you see with another band, which was literally made of former members of At the Gates, The Haunted. They just never reached that same level, although they tried desperately hard to.
Yeah, and it kind of like, and you could see like, and I applaud Tompa for wanting to continue that. But honestly, I in my heart of hearts, in the my cult heart, I was kind of like, bro, why did you start The Haunted? You should have just reignited Grotesque.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Oh
That would be
gosh,
really cool, because those are some
like
really great records that I think, unfortunately, will probably be forgotten to the mansions of rest.
yeah, it's pretty sad. But I mean, that pre at the gate stuff that he did with Grotesque, it's like, oh boy.
Mm-hmm. And
But I understand.
what blows my mind is that The Haunted is still continuing at the same time as At the Gates. I mean, they're not quite as busy. They don't tour quite as often, but they still put out an album like 4 years ago, and I'm willing to bet they probably have an album somewhere ready to be released.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think I read something somewhere that like At the Gates is like they're in pre-production or like in the writing process of their new album, which is gonna. Oh boy, I can't wait. Like
Oh yeah.
I think To Drink from the Knife itself was a pretty good album, like a more than worthy follow up to At War with Reality. But I feel like they still got more to. It's kind of funny because like they're considered veterans, but they don't have like the negative connotations of being a veteran act. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have they're not like like you've constantly ribbed here. They're not overkill. They're not putting out their 40th album.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. We're once again ribbing on Overkill. They've spent the last 40 years making the same album over and over. It's time to end it.
It's time to
stop.
To throw in the towel.
Same with Anvil, honestly. Like, it's time, guys. If you are going to release the same album over and over again, then it has to be good. Period.
Yeah.
Not decent, not okay. It has to be good. That's why Cannibal Corpse gets away with making the same album over and over again, because it's consistently good. That's why Motorhead got away with it. That's why Black Dahlia Murder's currently getting away with it.
And again, they're one of the bands that's pulling heavily from At the Gates and being able to translate that to an audience that was more into. I mean, let's be honest. I've met a lot of people who, when they started getting into heavier stuff through Black Dahlia Murder and like eventually finding At the Gates, they were listening to stuff like, fucking Blink 182 and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of like the way that Black Dahlia Murder has been able to translate that to a more focused and straightforward area, not to take away from what Black Dahlia Murder said, because their stuff is just their early stuff, and even as they're continuing to go now, they're murdering it.
Oh, they're making great records consistently.
Yeah.
I mean, they just kick ass.
Yeah, they really do. And the whole being able to translate that into a successful career is something that I feel like they've done, and it's because again they found this weird metal album from Sweden.
Oh, yeah. I think it also helps, just in the case of Black Dahlia Murder as well. Similarly to At the Gates, they are pulling from a wide range of influences. Like, they are pulling from In Flames, they're pulling from Dark Tranquillity, But they're also pulling from like some old school 90s hardcore and metalcore. They're also bringing in the kind of vocal techniques that we saw from deathcore in the late 2000s. They're also bringing in a lot of underground death metal influence. Trevor Strand is a hero, a champion, a connoisseur of underground music. He pays far more attention to what's happening in the deep underground than he does to what's happening on bands of his level. Like, he's not concerned with what Suicide Silence is doing right now. He's concerned about what fucking some underground French-Canadian blackened death metal crew is putting out.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, he wants to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
He firmly has his finger to the pulse of what's going on.
Absolutely. And I think that, to some extent, we talk about Black Dahlia Murder as if they're the modern Cannibal Corpse, and I suppose musically they are. But as far as how they perform and how they present themselves, I'd argue they're closer to At the Gates.
Oh, yeah. Because At the Gates, even though they had that period where they had that large period of being broken up, that inactivity, they still came back and brought the same level of professionalism that they had when they were performing as kids.
Mm-hmm. And literally as kids, I mean, when that dude yells go, the crowd goes.
Oh yeah.
The crowd goes, and it doesn't matter. Like, I remember seeing them in 2014, and it was a very diverse crowd. You had a bunch of hardcore kids there, showed up to see Converge. You had a bunch of music nerds there who probably also showed up to see Converge, but also Pallbearer. Valenfire was opening, so you had, like, some more, like, typical kind of black and death metal fanboys in the crowd. There was some Corpse Paint in there. And everyone agreed at the end of the night, when that dude says go, we go. And they went.
Yeah. There's no way around being able to, like, deny that call to arms.
Mm-hmm. It's just so, and it's going back to metalcore. It's not a coincidence. When that breakdown starts to come, the singer goes, "I want to see all your hands in the air," and he goes, "Go!" And then that riff hits.
Yeah, because I can't think of any other bands who were able to translate such a simple two-letter phrase into something that's just like
it is synonymous with them.
Yeah, it really is, and it's synonymous with how. I mean, even to a certain extent, you could hear that in Gojira on Backbone when he's like, when he says, "Plant your feet on the ground now, go," and then
yeah. Okay, I guess to be fair, Gojira are just as guilty for that too. Come to think of it,
dude. Like, I mean, shit. Anyone's guilty of that at this point. Like, Knocked Loose does it. Fucking Code Orange does it to a certain extent. Everybody has seen what the sheer force of Thomas Lindbergh's Go has been able to do. That to me is like, if you can copy that and translate it into and transcribe it to the aesthetic of a whole other subgenre, you've done something right.
Absolutely. And then going back to metalcore, that's why I see At the Gates is not a metalcore band. Let's make that clear. But this is where Slaughter the Soul. This is laying the groundwork for what becomes American metalcore. And not to discredit early records from Integrity, Earth Crisis, Converge, but like everything that we identify from bands like Killswitch Engage, As I Lay Dying, Shadows Fall, All That Remains, that's Slaughter the Soul right there. And it's worth noting, Frederick Nordstrom even goes on to produce records with Bring Me the Horizon in the late 2000s.
Huh, how interesting is that?
What a fascinating little coincidence right there.
I know. I mean, it seems like, in a way, like Frederick Nordstrom is seen as kind of the guy to go to if you want to make a dialed-in, polished, heavy record.
I would argue he has done for, like, the Swedish death metal sound and, like, more professional death metal, the kind of what Scott Burns did for, like, American death metal. Just, like, taking it to the next level and giving it that edge and that polish that it needs.
Yeah. And then I think there are some guys nowadays who are able to, like, take what Nordstrom did on Slaughter of the Soul and kind of translate it to their own work. Like Arthur Rizek especially is able to do that.
Oh,
Same with
he's on a roll.
and same with speaking of Converge, Kurt Ballou. Like that guy can make that dude could make the shittiest demo sound like a fucking Rolling Stones record.
Honestly. And he's got to be one of the busiest producers in punk, rock, and metal music. He has to be.
Oh, yeah.
Because he just, it seems as though there was literally 3 years ago, like when, I think, 2017-18, where like my top 10 list had like Converge, Mutoid Man, Paul Bearer, a bunch of other records, and I looked at the list and I went, oh my god, Paul Bearer, Kurt Ballou shows up on here like 5 times.
Yeah.
Because like he's produced records for Full of Hell, he's done records for Mutoid Man, he's done records for Trap Them, High on Fire. He's all over the place.
Yeah,
Nails as well. Yes. All Pigs Must Die. I feel like I gotta look this up because there's so many. Cavalier Conspiracy 2017. He apparently he. Okay, no, I'm looking at Arthur Rizek now. My apologies.
Oh.
But I mean, since we're here, screw it. Let's look. Arthur Rizek's on a roll too. He's worked with Power Trip. He's worked with Venom Prison. He produced Two Mold and Gatecreeper as well, didn't he?
He did Two Mold. I think he may have helped somewhat with Gatecreeper. I know he's also done work with his own bands, like he's done Eternal Champion and Summerlands.
Mm-hmm.
And those 2 records, I mean, shit, if you haven't heard the new Eternal Champion that just dropped yesterday, oh my goodness.
I thought it wasn't dropping for 2 weeks.
Oh no, they dropped it yesterday on Bandcamp.
Oh, well, okay, shit.
Yeah.
Alright, I know what I'm doing later.
Yeah. It's very interesting because like you hear like their producing styles, like they're very dialed in. Like Rizek is very dialed in, and he knows how to produce a record. And I would be hard pressed to say that like there's no way he didn't look at what Nordstrom did for At the Gates on Slaughter of the Soul.
No, absolutely, I'd agree with that. And I mean, this is a guy. Who knows? Maybe 10 years from now, we'll be talking about Arthur the way the way we talk about Scott Burns and Frederick, because he's got his finger to the pulse of modern extreme music. For God's sakes, he was working with Code Orange on the Forever album, which is basic. That album alone, that's gonna be. That is the big album for this generation of hardcore and heavy music. Very much so.
Oh yeah, easy.
Like, and not to discredit Underneath, because I think that's definitely their most successful record, but Forever laid the groundwork for Code Orange becoming the absolute titans that they are.
Oh yeah, easy. That is not a far-fetched claim at all.
Mm-hmm. Because I mean, that's the point where some of the more melodic and alternative influences are definitely present on I Am King, but they're still pretty firmly a hardcore band. Forever is where it's like, no, we're getting more metal. We're also bringing in more industrial influence for like interludes and little bits and pieces. We're making a straight up like grunge song with Bleeding in the Blur.
Yeah.
But going back to Arthur, with him being so ahead of the curve with Code Orange and with underground death metal and with thrash metal as well, he produced the last Power Trip record. I think a few years from now we're going to be looking at his work the way that we look at Frederick and Scott Burns.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. That dude, like, and he's also he's a musician as well. Like he's able to not only produce, but he's also able to play. It's I wouldn't doubt that. He's one dude that is just very put together when it comes to being able to produce a record.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was just gonna say, but yeah, it's very interesting to see also too, like how you were talking about the melodic stuff. It's like even bands who are not technically metal bands, like, are even taking influence. Like you listen to a band like Counterparts, it's like, okay, yeah, I can hear some At the Gates here.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Counterparts especially, actually, because they're just such an aggressive band. Like, even by the standards of modern hardcore, they are so volatile.
Yeah. And you hear their twin guitars going, and it's like, okay, yeah, there's parts of it where it's like, okay, am I sure? Are you sure I'm not listening to At the Gates right now?
Mm-hmm. And I honestly, I feel like Slaughter the Soul. I mean, obviously it's influential. We all know it's influential, but I think it's maybe there aren't a lot of other albums I can think of that have had such an impact on the modern metal scene going forward. Like 25 years later, Slaughter the Soul still influences so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, and that's what's interesting. I feel like, everybody talks about how there were a lot of really big influential albums that came out in, like, obviously 91 and even to a certain extent 1993. But, and include with Slaughter of the Soul coming out in 95, 95 was fucking stacked with, like, albums that really did change the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you had, you had obviously Slaughter of the Soul come out that year. Gallery came out that year. Storm of the Lights Bane was released that year. Shit, what else? Oh, Ulver's Bergtot came out that year.
Did Enslaved not have an album out that year?
Um, they came out with Frost the year before.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking of then. Okay, I guess that doesn't count then. Because I was about to say that's kind of a big point for black metal as well, where we're seeing black metal start to move away from the antics of Mayhem and Burzum and go into different territory.
Yeah, like when Ulver comes out with Bergtot, it's like, okay, black and folk metal basically has its inception point.
Mm-hmm. Or come to think of it, did Emperor not have an album out around that time? I mean, I know they did. I just can't remember the exact year or whatever.
Because Nightside came out in 94. The only reason I remember that is because the only member who was not in prison at the time was Yasan.
That's like a staple of black metal itself. You got to go to jail before you make a record.
Yeah. No, Anthems came out in 97, so...
Okay. Well, 94 is an interesting year for black metal, at least, then.
Yeah. And, I mean, hell, the quote, the black metal album came out that year, too. De Mystery Stomp Sathanas. So it's like, 95 just had something, like, there's something very interesting about 95. Like, the couple of very groundbreaking albums that came out that year are, like, ones that, like, absolutely changed everything. Draconian Times came out that year. Like there's so many albums that came out in 1995 that people look at and they're like, okay, yeah, those are really, really good albums. It's like, no. They're not really good albums. These are albums that, like, defined the sound going forward.
Absolutely. They Slaughter the Soul especially, I'm going to make a very bold claim here. This has influenced metal and extreme music in the same way that Master of Puppets and Rain and Blood have. Like, there are generations of bands that imitate the crap out of this sound.
Yeah, and even people who don't even know they're pulling from it.
Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, who knows? Maybe tons of Bring Me the Horizon fans are listening to fucking At the Gates. Who knows? But I'm willing to bet 2010, the kids that are going to Warped Tour to go see Bring Me the Horizon probably don't know a whole lot about At the Gates, but they know that sound, and that sound comes from At the Gates.
Yep, and it's again that reptilian brain thing where they're like, I recognize this. Why does this feel so familiar? Why does this seem like this is something I can connect with? Well, it's because the people that you connected with that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it goes back to, like, well, you get that when you listen to any artist, really, because everyone's influenced by something. Let's be honest here. I can't really... it's very rare that you find a band where it's like, I can't compare this to really anything, or you can't connect the dots to where something might have come from.
Yeah.
I mean, even a band like At the Gates, you listen to At the Gates and you can hear bits and pieces from some of their Swedish contemporaries, especially when you go back to the early stuff and they're making music alongside Entombed and Grave and Dismember.
Yeah.
Even if, I mean, it's objectively weirder, but
yeah,
it's,
yeah,
you know, it's not totally off from what those guys were kind of putting out.
Exactly.
And I guess that's the profound impact of At the Gates right there. But it also makes me wonder, where the hell does this band go in the future? Do they settle into a rut where they start to make the same type of album over and over again, or do they continue to evolve and expand?
That's where I think, and that's, you know, I don't want to sound like a Nostradamus here, but I have a feeling that this next album that they're going to come out with is probably going to be an album that, like, where they're going to be like, this is our final defining statement. You know what I mean? I feel like they're going to come out with maybe another album or two, and they're going to say, okay, this is our work, and this is what we've, this is our legacy, and do with it as you see fit. Do with it.
That's very likely
in an influence sense.
I mean, that I can picture that happening, honestly, because I mean, these guys have been around for a while. I mean, they maybe not actively through the 2000s, but there does come a point where you got to make a decision. Are you going to stick around forever, or are you going to, you know, are you going to be Motley Crue and just refuse to disappear? Or are you going to be, or Kiss is another great example, or are you going to be like Dillinger Escape Plan and say, we can't physically do this anymore, we're happy with what we've done, goodbye?
Yeah, like ISIS did. Like, everybody was, I mean, ISIS was at their most visibly, they were at their most visible. They just got off touring with Tool and put out Wavering Radiant, and then they're just like, yeah, we've done all we wanted to musically, see ya.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Gorguts hasn't said it, but Gorguts is very much reaching that point as well. They've been very inactive these last couple of years, and Luc Lemay, as far as I know, is not writing any material.
Yeah, and who knows? Like, I think At the Gates will come out with maybe another album or two, and then they'll be like, okay, we have a little bit more dignity and a little bit more respect for our fans to not just milk this forever.
Mm-hmm. And it's inevitable. And there's nothing wrong with that, because eventually nothing lasts forever. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And I would prefer they go out with dignity than, again, pull a Motley Crue and just be like, yeah, we're tired and overweight and we can't physically do this anymore, but we're going to do it anyway because everyone watched The Dirt and we're popular now.
Yeah.
Like that. Or Kiss, where it's just like, yeah, we just want the money. Give us the money.
Yeah.
They're not even trying to dress it up. I almost admire that. They're just like, give us money.
Yeah. I think the guys in At the Gates have a lot more respect for their fans and for, you know, the people that have put them where they are and how they've put themselves there, to say, okay, maybe it's time we take a back seat and let the next generation that we've influenced become the elder statesmen.
Mm-hmm. I believe that would be for the best, especially the impact of Slaughter the Soul can already be, again, it's shown everywhere, it's seen everywhere. It's influencing bands that are now influencing and changing, and in some cases have already changed the landscape of heavy and alternative music. And, you know, who knows? If At the Gates can consistently just put out great records, then fine, keep going, fuck it. Napalm Death is in that situation. They just consistently put out great records. Carcass is in that situation. That Despicable EP was fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think even those bands will come to a point where they're like, we're like 60. I want to retire. You know?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Thomas Lindbergh, he's 48 years old. And he's not
spring chicken anymore.
No. And I admire that he's able to keep up with the youngins, but there is going to be a point where he can't It's that simple. And it doesn't matter who you are. Like, David Lee Roth used to be the most energetic frontman in all of rock music, in all of popular music. And if you watch video of some of his recent live performances, recent in quotation points at this point, he's not really sounding that great. And the same can be said for some of his other peers. Danzig is not in great health. Ozzy Osbourne is not in great health. Ozzy especially. Dude, it is time. Retire. Please.
Ozzy needs to hang it up.
It is time, dude. We love you. We do not exist without you, but it is time. It is getting painful to watch you drag yourself out on stage and mutter.
Yeah, and that's I think even Tony Iommi recognized that.
Mm-hmm. He did. He saw what happened to Dio. Or not that Dio went out on a good note, let's make that clear. But he saw what was happening to Dio, and he said, I want to go out with dignity. I don't want to have, I have cancer now, or lymphonia, I believe he still has. And he's like, I want this to end, and I want to spend my last few years with my friends and family. So this needs to come to an end.
Yep, exactly.
And good on him. But, and Ozzy should be at that point, because he's like 60 years old, probably close to 70, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he damn near is 70.
He bloody close if he isn't.
Seriously.
And, you know, the big thing for me, you know, when I saw him at, what was it, the MTV Music Awards, like, last year or something, and he did that song with Post Malone and Travis Scott, and he's just sitting there in the back on this chair, and there's so much smoke, and there's so much, like, laser effects and shit that you can't even really see him, but you can just see him, like, very quietly waving his arms, and he's very obviously not singing, it's very obviously lip sync. And it's just pathetic. And I'm sitting there thinking, we've got Travis Scott, no disrespect to the guy, but we're talking about a guy who does not put out the most technical ability, easily outperforming Ozzy. Easily.
And that's kind of sad.
And like, we're talking about, again, no disrespect to the guy, but we are talking about a gentleman whose job is to speak and then they auto-tune it. And he is easily outperforming Ozzy. The Prince of Darkness. Like, that is sad.
And I don't think Thomas and the rest of the guys at the Gates want to get to that point where they're being wheeled out to perform, you know, to perform songs.
Oh yeah. Like I don't want to see that. I don't want to see 10 years from now fucking I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a contemporary musician, like let's say they do that. Let's say they make a song with Post Malone or some hip hop artist, or they play a song with like some young hardcore band or death metal band. I don't want to see for them to be like, all right, we're going to play Slaughter the Soul and we got a special guest, and they have to literally wheel out Thomas and he's like, go. I don't want that. I don't.
Yeah, no.
And you know, again, he appears to be in pretty good physical shape. So who knows? Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe he does have another 10 years in him.
Yeah.
But I hope that when the time comes, he will recognize, and at the Gates will recognize, that they're done.
Yeah. And that's where it's interesting to see, like, a band like Paradise Lost, like, they've kept their core, but I feel like they've kind of had a fire reignited with them. It's kind of interesting. Like, they had a fire of reignition when Adrian Erlandson from At the Gates joined the band, and now they have this kid named Valtteri, who is like the same age as Slaughter of the Soul, funny enough.
Literally.
Drumming with, and he's been able to like integrate himself into like a band that they're all very, you know, closely knit. They've been together since they were teenagers, but they recognize that, hey, we're getting older, but we're just going to keep making it as we can, and we know we'll know when to quit. And I think At the Gates being contemporaries with Paradise Lost, and you know, touring with them even back in the early days, I think they know that there's going to be a point where it's like, okay, we need to hang it up, but it's not going to be a bad thing that we hang it up, because we've released a genre-defining piece of work. I would even say they've released multiple genre-defining works.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that stands above all is one that the influence, no matter how elitist and how freaking, you know, tight you may be about certain things, it's like you cannot deny how utterly influential and important that album is.
Oh, absolutely. Like it's not even about like I could care less whether you like or dislike it. You cannot argue that this did not have a profound impact.
Yeah,
you can't.
like its impact is stratospheric.
It's like when I talk about Metallic on the Metal Meltdown. I'm like, dude, say whatever you want about Saint Anger. Say whatever you want about Lulu. Say whatever you want about Hardwired. You cannot erase Kill 'Em All. You cannot erase Master of Puppets. And yeah, I'm gonna say it. You can't erase the Black Album. You can't.
Right.
They had profound impacts. However you feel about those albums, it doesn't matter. It does not matter.
The impact, good or bad, no matter what, there's an impact. And if that impact is felt by thousands or even millions, then as far as I'm concerned as an artist, you've done your job.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I guess, speak of the devil, that's another band that maybe needs to consider hanging it up, Metallica. Maybe it's time.
Dude, it's you know, honestly, it's been time for a hot minute.
I think Saint Anger alone was proof that maybe it's time. But I don't know.
It was proven to me in 2017 when I saw them at the at University of Phoenix Stadium where the Arizona Cardinals play. So big fucking like enormous NFL football arena.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm walking through the concourse with all of my buddies. And I was the only dude there that was not wearing a Metallica shirt. I was wearing a Chemist shirt. I wanted to see who I could identify with at this big show, but it was a very odd sight seeing families at a Metallica show. I was like, what the actual fuck?
Yeah, no, they've reached that point where they are very much sonically they are not in the same league, but they are very much a classic rock kind of band where, like, you know, it's like Alice Cooper. People bring their kids to Alice Cooper. That would not have happened in the 70s, but it happens now.
People bring their kids to go see Kiss.
Yeah. That one especially is weird to me because I'm like, man, Kiss sucks. Like, come on. I don't know. I might be in the minority on that one, but yeah, it just reaches a point where it's like, Metallica, I love you, I respect you, but like, and it's not even that the families are there. That's kind of wonderful in and of itself. Like, wow, this band, like, they love this band. Good for them. But more so that it's just like, you're not really bringing in new fans per se. Like,
no.
People might, you know, don't get me wrong, I like Hardwired, I genuinely do, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend it's anywhere on the level of Master of Puppets.
Yeah, no.
It's not.
No.
Not even close. And I'm not going to pretend it's anywhere near the level of Ride the Lightning or the Black Album. It's not. And that's not objectively a bad thing, but it is for a fan base that just consistently wants to hear those classics. No one cares about the new albums. Not really.
Yeah.
Like, okay, great, you won a Grammy and you did a song with Lady Gaga. Awesome. Guess what? No one cares.
Yeah.
Not really.
It's like, excuse me, it's like they're the only band to have ever played on all 7 continents. Like, don't you think that's an accomplishment in and of itself?
Oh, absolutely.
Highly hanging it up.
Like, exactly. They've won Grammys, they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Black Album still somehow sells 5,000 copies every week. It's time. You've done your thing. It's time. You know?
Don't tarnish your legacy further.
Mm-hmm. All right. I don't really have much else to say on At the Gates, and I think I gotta get going, to be honest with you. Any final thoughts on Slaughter of the Soul and this monumental record?
If people who are listening to this in the days that follow, go.
That sums it up right there.
Just go!
Go! Go! Yeah. If you haven't listened to that album already, folks, if go listen to it. Just do it.
We all know that there are some of us who are alone because of this COVID thing that are just at home, not doing a fucking thing. Turn off Netflix for a sec.
Yeah.
And and if you have a physical copy, no matter what you have of it, if you have the tape version, the CD, the digital version, just put it on.
Yeah.
And just allow Blinded by Fear to just consume you and turn you into a raging maniac.
And you know what? If you're in a situation where you can meet up with people safely, like people you know within your inner circle, and you can play this record, throw a little party, man. Pretend that the world isn't on fire while listening to music that absolutely would burn the world to a cinder.
Oh, yes, I agree.
Oh, all right, I think that does it for me. Thank you very much, Tyson, for joining us here today.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate it. This has been, as always, a pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you liked what you saw and heard here today, press subscribe for updates on the Metal Meltdown immediately. Make sure you check out Slaughter the Soul. Make sure you follow Tyson as well, at TyTilly on Instagram, a true connoisseur of extreme music. Check out Heaviest of Art as well. And as always, y'all have yourself a fantastic fucking day. I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Joe Biden is president.
Holy fuck! As we were recording this, Joe Biden became the president.
Yep, he now has 290 electoral votes.
I'm not even lying, I'm still recording.
Oh, seriously?
I left the microphone on.
What the fuck?
All you incels that message me every day because you're so upset that I dared to talk ill of Brian Posehn and 6 Feet Under. Trump 2020, you're gay. Fuck you. Biden just won, bitch.
Oh, man. I cannot. You know what? I thought there was going to be some final rallying cry with Trump, but I guess not.
Man.
He got to 214 and halted.
He flipped Pennsylvania. That's what it was.
Yep.
But yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens to the other states. Trump cannot mathematically win.
No. And I'm surprised that, like, as red of a state that I came from in Arizona was able to, flip and become a blue state. I was like, wow, okay.
Well, to be fair, granted, Fox News has called it, and so has The Guardian, but CNN has not for Arizona.
Weird.
Although it's still leaning pretty blue, so I think it's safe to say that may remain blue.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing could be said for Nevada and Georgia, although they'll probably go to a recount in Georgia.
Oh, he won Nevada.
Trump won Nevada?
No. Biden did.
Oh, Biden did?
Yep.
Oh, shit. That's all right. That's an extra blow. At this point, Biden just needs to win enough electoral votes where Trump can't argue that if they recount, they'll suddenly find more votes for him.
Oh, dude, no. Like, it's 270 to win. Biden's at 290.
290 with... Wait, what? Where'd you get that from?
I'm looking at the Associated Press right now.
Okay.
Yeah, like, you need the 270 to win the race. Biden is at 290.
290, my God.
So he's...
Did they count Arizona and Nevada?
Yep.
Okay, that would explain why the numbers... He probably... Yeah. Yeah, Trump cannot mathematically win then. Even if he can somehow argue in court and end up flipping those states.
Yeah, no, Joe Biden is now the 46th president of the United States.
Oh, thank God, the nightmare is over. Oh, my Lord.
Although, this is something that I've heard about, and I doubt it would happen. People are thinking that Trump will try to pull a Grover Cleveland.
And just stay there?
No, Grover Cleveland is the only U.S. president to be the 22nd and 24th presidents, respectively.
Oh yes, two non-consecutive terms.
Yep.
Oh my god. I don't know if Trump could pull that off, honestly.
Yeah, I doubt he could.
Even if he, not even just from like politically, I don't think physically he can do that.
Yeah, no.
Like these last 4 years, he was never a particularly healthy guy, but these last 4 years, especially he had COVID, like he's in bad shape.
Yeah, the dude is fucked up. Let's be honest.
Like he's 74 years old and lives on a diet, a diet of Coca-Cola and cheeseburgers. He is not a healthy man.